selective breeding, natural selection, Darwin and all that. Year 9 revision and review for exams. K3, 11 plus, all that good IGCSE and GCSE stuff. So, a selection. When you buy a box of chocolates, you have a selection. You can choose this one, or this one, or this one. And of course, the best ones are always the first ones to go. With selecting animals and plants, the best ones are the ones that go into the future. A farmer finds one particular wheat plant that's disease resistant, and he thinks to himself, that's what I need. So rather than eating those seeds as bread or pasta or pizza base, he saves those seeds, the best seeds he uses to plant the future wheat. And this has been done by thousands of years by farmers and horticulturalists. They've selected the best and kept them. Sometimes, with such as cows, we started with the auroch. Auroch was very angry, and so the farmers selected the ones that were less angry. Aurochs were enormous and dangerous, so he selected the ones that were shorter and smaller, calmer. Aurochs didn't produce much milk, and so over thousands of years the aurochs were around when Stonehenge was there. Over thousands of years, we've selected the auroch species to be our cow species today that gives lots of milk. They're quite inquisitive. Always a good idea to go and read a book in a cow field if you've got a couple of hours to spend. And the cows will come up because you're interesting. They're mammals. They have a large brain. They have inquisitiveness. They'll come up and see what you're doing. And yeah, if you are brave enough, they'll surround you and start to lick your book, because that's how cows experience the world. Unfortunately, the males, we've also selectively bred so that they will grow large very quickly. 6 months, maybe 9, 2 years for some cow species. The bulls, this is. I mean, maybe 1 in 1,000 is kept for its semen to then be artificially inseminated into the cows. So the biggest, strongest will be selected. And all the other bulls, that's what your hamburgers are. Male mammals, only a few months old. Maybe 9. It's a little bit sad. But they are very inquisitive. And they're nice while they're on this earth. Not in factory farms, please. Let them at least enjoy a short time in the sunlight, eating grass, as their auroch ancestors did. We've selectively bred chickens to produce eggs even when they're not fertilised. It's very unusual to get fertilised eggs. That's when you know you've gone free range. Because then there's a cockerel who gets to the chickens and inseminates them. And so that means you get chicks. So the chicks come from farms that just do that. The eggs come from farms that just do that. And of course the chicks go to the egg farm. And the ones that are for eating, those ones tend to be the females. It's the female chickens that grow the large breasts and put on lots and lots of weight that people want in their supermarket shopping. And so what happens to the male ones? Well, okay, 1 in 10,000 becomes the cockerel that artificially inseminates. So you take the semen from the animal and you split it up into small bits, because you only need maybe 1,000 sperms for each egg. And there are millions and millions produced each time. And so one cockerel gets a kind of okay life, but no actual chickens usually, to run around with, unless it really is free range. Free range is better. At least they get sunshine and they get to scratch in the ground and they get to peck at the earth and maybe they'll get a worm or an insect and that makes them all excited and they have fun. Chickens in cages isn't nice. So organic, free range, much preferable. But what happens to all the male chicks? 50% of them are male. Well, two things. If you get an egg tester and he can test whether an egg will produce a male or a female just by holding the egg for less than a second. And they pop them out like this. Thousands of them every day. Or you wait until they're born. And in which case, the males get put into shredders. Little fluffy chicks. It's surprising what the meat industry does for us. Anyway, back to selective breeding. Tomatoes. If you have a tomato in Hong Kong, for instance, because I went there and my students know this, if you have a tomato in Hong Kong, the tomato has to fly in. So, big tomatoes, no, they're not preferred. Tomatoes that won't last very long, no, they're not preferred. They have to be picked, shipped, flown, shipped, supermarket, sold. It can be weeks later. So they've selectively bred them to last a long time. They don't taste very nice. When you selectively breed something, you often lose some of the characteristics that are nice. Some of the traits are gone. Dogs. We got them friendly, but now the friendly little ones aren't so good at guarding your house. We've selectively bred that out of them. You don't get everything for free. And with cows, we've selectively bred them, but now a lot of calves, they've got jaw deformalities because we've selectively bred, and that's changed their DNA over time, modified their DNA over time. Not GM, not genetically modified, but we've modified. We've selected them. And so that's pushed their DNA in one particular direction, the direction the farmer wanted. But many calves have got now a jaw deformality. They can't suckle. They can't drink their mother's milk, and so they die. Now, how does milk come about? Well, you have a cow. It is impregnated. It has a calf. It starts to produce milk like all mammals do. And then you take the calf away. And then you keep on milking the cow. And eventually the cow will get trained quite nicely into going into the milking sheds to be milked. And of course, thousands of years ago, it was a matter of pumping the milk out by hand. And then it became machines, and now some of them are totally automated. The farmer can stay in bed, and the cows will queue up and happily go through the machine and have that uncomfortable, full feeling from their udders. You have the milk taken out, taken away. And so the cows are happy to eat in the fields and queue up. This is nice for the cows, not the bulls. Calves. You can't really call them bulls if they only last for a few months. Selectively bred. Tomatoes, wheat. There are problems. We've made our tomatoes very red. We've made oranges orange. They used to be green, which is kind of weird. Only orange on the inside. The outside was still covered in chlorophyll. And so, many parts of the world, oranges are still green on the outside because orange is a silly colour. Green is the colour of get more sunlight and more carbon dioxide, more water to photosynthesize into food. And oxygen for the silly humans and other mammals, other animals to breathe. They're selectively bred. But we have also genetically modified GM foods, often called Frankenstein foods. I'll come back to that. Frankenstein foods, where we've taken a gene from a fish and put it into a tomato. And people are a little bit weird about that, and I'm not surprised. That's a strange thing to do, and it makes the tomatoes last longer. you'll never know which ones you've got, unless you've got the sort of tomatoes that I have here in Portugal now. Taste lovely. Don't last very long. Eat them very soon. If your food doesn't last long, it's more natural. Okay, they are a lot bigger than they were. They have been selectively bred, but they haven't been spliced with their DNA. I'm going to put a fish DNA in there. They're still around. Most of the food that you buy from the supermarket, the super processed stuff like crisps and biscuits and cakes and tins of soup and things, they've got maize. High fructose corn syrup maize inside. Gives it that sweet taste. It's also very cheap, so you can put loads of it in it. And the maize is almost entirely genetically modified. If you're going to be one of those organic people that won't eat anything genetically modified, you've got a lot of ingredients reading to do to get away from genetically modified high fructose corn syrup, which frankly I don't like in my food. That's just sweet stuff and filler. No, thanks. I'd rather something more expensive though. Not necessarily organic, because organic carrots tend to look a little bit small and weedy, and it's a look that lots of people go for. That's not what organic means. The word organic means it comes from an organism. So all food is organic, apart from salt, which is of course a mineral. You can dig it out of the ground, get it from rocks. That's not organic. Every other piece of food is, by the chemistry definition of organic, is organic food. But by the food definition of organic, it's from a place or a farm that doesn't use fertilizers, herbicides, any of the sides, insecticides, any of those things, or genetically modified, any of those things that people are worried about. And yes, DDT, herbicides and insecticides, or DDT was an insecticide. Killing insects meant the insects died. Unfortunately, the half-dead insects were then eaten by frogs and reptiles. And then they were eaten by birds. Now, you've got a tiny amount in each insect, and a frog will eat 100 a day. So you've got lots of DDT in the frogs, or other herbicides, insecticides. The sides get everywhere. And then the bird eats 3 frogs a day. And so the bird gets much more of the poison inside it. And then along comes an eagle. And so an eagle eating 2 birds a day, 60 birds in a month, gets lots and lots of poison. And this is what killed the eagles in Scotland. And the people that started the whole organic thing going were the tweeters, the bird watchers. And they went, hey, where's all the eagles gone? Why are all the eggs thin? Why is there no babies? Where's the eagles gone? And so that's called bioaccumulation. The amount of poison goes up. So therefore, when I buy fish, I tend not to buy tuna. Tuna's a big fish. Get little fish, eating bigger fish, eaten by bigger fish, eaten by bigger fish, eaten by bigger fish. Bioaccumulation means the fish that will have the most poison in it from making your mobile phone. The waste poisons from making a mobile phone, one of the worst things that you can do to this planet. Get a mobile phone, surely. You need it to play games, to social media. But don't get a new one every year, because they cause more pollution than anything else you can do. And yeah, they're made in China. They say made in America, but actually they're designed in America. The actual manufacturing, the factory is in China. And it sends its poisons unchecked. That's the reason why they're made in China, not Europe, which has really strong anti-pollution laws, and America, which also has strong anti-pollution laws. They're made in China, which doesn't. So the pollution gets chucked into the rivers, which go into the sea, and all the seas are linked. So the poisons from your mobile phone turn up in your fish. A little bit in the small fish. Lots and lots in the flesh of tuna, salmon, big fish. I eat small fish. Omega-3s. Or walnuts. There's an alternative to getting the omega-3s you need to grow brains for the myelin sheath. But that's another story. Okay, back to the biology. Selective breeding, done that. Positives, negatives, done that. Next page was, Darwin and Wallace. Darwin was a famous scientist at the time. His grandfather was also a famous scientist. And he was a famous scientist, and his grandfather also thought about, hold on a second, why are animals changing over time? What's happening here? And how come giraffes have long necks? And there was Mr. French guy, Baptista, correct me if I'm wrong with the pronunciation of that one. He said, giraffes stretch up a lot to reach the leaves at the top of the trees. And so therefore, during all their lifetime, their necks will get longer and longer and longer just because they're trying. Just like bodybuilders make bigger muscles. Yes, bodybuilders do make bigger muscles. And you do get stronger. The harder you try, the faster you get, the stronger you are. But that doesn't work for bones. No, what happens with bones takes hundreds of thousands of years, where climate change kills all the shorter neck of the variation in the population, because there's DNA. There's lots of different DNA. Some giraffes had slightly longer necks, and those ones could eat when all the others died. And so therefore they had offspring. The slightly longer neck DNA got passed into the future, and they bred up, and the climate change ended eventually. And so there were millions of them again. And then another climate change happened. And again, the ones with slightly longer necks were the ones that survived. And so giraffe necks have got longer as time's gone on. That's natural selection. Also called, aka, also known as evolution. Baptista was wrong. Darwin's dad was onto something, but wrong. Darwin had spent years going around the world, collecting samples. Yeah, some finches. Okay, he's known for the finches thing, okay, because the finches make really good pictures for books. But he did a lot of work on barnacles. He was Mr. Barnacle, tiny little sea-living creatures. He really knew his barnacles. He was also really interested in pigeons. How, at the time, people bred pigeons to look cool. Big fluffy ones with fluffy feet, lots of different colours. And he was thinking, how's this happening? What's this to do with nature? How come you can breed such a funky looking pigeon into a weird looking dove by selective breeding? And he thought, maybe this is what happens in nature. And he was onto something. And then he received a letter from a guy who'd been travelling around getting samples of animals, birds, and stuffing them and sending them back to people with lots of money. But anyway, paid for his travels around Indonesia. And he was coming up with the same ideas, almost exactly the same as Darwin. And so lots of people think, Darwin stole Wallace's ideas. No, not true. Because if you read the book, The Origin of Species by Darwin, it says in there, me and Wallace both came up with this. I did the writing of the book. He also came up with the ideas. The guy was a hero and a nice guy as well. Not many of those. So what Darwin figured out was, I don't know why, there's something going on. But the ones that are more fit for their niche do better. The slightly longer neck giraffes survive. I don't know why. But he had it all written down, even before DNA was discovered. He knew what was going on. And so he was one that suggested whales evolved from bears and spent a long time by the seashore, eventually going deeper and deeper into the water, and slowly, over hundreds of thousands, millions of years, changing into the whales we see today. Yeah, we just recently found out that it was right. DNA of whales is most similar to the DNA of bears. So us, our DNA, didn't come from chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans. Us, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans all came from a common ancestor. 10, maybe 6 million years ago. It's kind of hazy when it comes to many millions of years ago in evolution. There were lots of hominid species, and we survived. Possibly because we had voice box, which the Neanderthals didn't have, because they had bigger brains than us, and they were stronger than us. They were organised, they had culture. They buried their dead in flowers, possibly had musical instruments too, and other things that we just haven't found yet. So yeah, evolution. It's being the slightly faster cheetah that gets enough food to survive till tomorrow when all the other cheetahs die. Every time an animal dies, evolution is happening because another animal has survived, and the other animal with the slightly better DNA, with slightly better adaptations, more characteristics that fit the niche. It's no good with everything having big brains or everything being really fast. There's a lot of price to pay to being the fastest cat on earth. You have a look at cheetahs, they're not built for fighting. They can't run for a long time. And us, we put a lot of our food, energy into our brains, which is not a problem today because we get too much food anyway. But a million years ago, that was an investment that didn't work for most creatures. It did for us because we were hanging out by the sea. And we got, because of climate change, we got to look, there's no food on land. All the hominids, all the human-like creatures, stood upright, 2 hands, looked pretty much like us. They'd be okay if you clothe them up, put a decent hat on them, they'd be able to get away with sitting on a bus. No one would notice. All the other hominid species and subspecies died out. Oh, train goes by. Whereas ours survived, partly because of our big brains, partly because of our jaws were the right types of robustest ones for chewing roots and vegetables and stuff. And at that time, climate change wiped everything off Africa because that's where all the hominids were hanging out. Apart from the Neanderthals that got to Europe, but most of them were hanging out in Africa. That's where we evolved. And we were by the sea, near Cape Town, South Africa. And we thought, no food out there on the land. I wonder if there's anything to eat in the sea. And so, we started to eat fish, which gave us the omega-3s that we need from the fish, before they were polluted. From the fish, microplastics in every fish, because of people throwing away plastic bags and bottles every day. All gets broken up into little bits and it ends up in the flesh of fish, because most places where they dump the trash that you make is next to the sea, and so all the little microplastics going to the sea. It doesn't matter, it's okay, that's another soapbox for a different time. Where was it? So they got the omega-3s that could mean they could grow brains. Nice to have that around. But also it was an advantage, because then they started, rather than just grabbing at fish, they started throwing rocks at them. They started throwing sticks at them. They started putting rocks on the end of sticks and making a spear to throw at them. They started sharpening the spear. That's culture. Gradually, we evolved the big brains because we were eating the food from the fish, and the big brains helped. And that's called a positive feedback loop. The more fish you got, the cleverer you got. The more fish you got, the less chance of dying. And the cleverer you got, the more you invented better and better spears to spear hunt them, and fishing rods and all sorts of things. And that's how we spread around the world, around the coastline. It was hundreds of thousands of years later that we eventually went inland and met the Neanderthals. 2% of your body. 2% of your DNA in your body is Neanderthal DNA if you're Caucasian. Less if you're Asian, but also they had other hominids linked up with them. The Davidsons, recently discovered. Natural selection, evolution, natural selection, evolution, same, offspring, babies, species, characteristics, that's my lesson for today. Good luck with your exams, guys.